Welcome to Messenger. I'm Johannes Lijalam. The Ethio-UK relations is both historic and valuable. Ethiopia was the first African country to establish its embassy in London, and the United Kingdom was amongst the few countries to establish its embassy in Addis Ababa. Ethiopia will always remember UK's historic role in the fight against fascism in the Second World War. Currently, UK and Ethiopia are closely working in areas of common concern. But this time, Ethiopia is going through a difficult time. Conflict in the north and drought in other parts of the country. What can UK do to help the people of Ethiopia as its people go through such a difficult time? To shed light on this issue, I am joined by UK Ambassador to Ethiopia and Permanent Representative to the African Union, Dr. Alstair MacPhail. It is great to have you, Ambassador. How valuable, how important is the relationship between these two countries?
Well, thank you very much for that welcome. It's delightful to be back in Bahar Dar. I've been here quite a number of times, and I've even given an interview on this channel before as well. So it's nice to be back. Thank you again. I think you've said it yourself. We have worked together for many years, going back to the Battle of Adwa and before then. We place a great importance on the relationship with Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a large and important country in itself, to the region, to the continent and to the world. And we have been very happy to work very closely with the people of Ethiopia over many decades to build a partnership and a friendship which lasts through good times and not so good times.
People in Amhara region, particularly in Afar regions, are in need of humanitarian assistance. And what is the UK trying to address the issue in relation to human rights conditions in these two regions, particularly?
Well, there are a number of questions there. There's humanitarian as well as human rights. Let me look at the humanitarian issues to begin with. The UK has provided more than £80 million already to people affected by the conflict in Amhara, Afar and Tigray. This funding will help provide shelter, nutrition services, water and sanitation, healthcare and education for affected people, and support for survivors of sexual violence. Let me give you a couple of figures and break down what that means. So we're providing nearly 370,000 vulnerable children under 5 with treatment for severe acute malnutrition. More than 214,000 people with health consultations, and more than 30,000 children who've been forced out of school back into learning in a safe environment.
Women in Amhara region suffered from TPLF's rape, sexual slavery and violence, and they are going through trauma. Some have even committed suicide as a result of this situation. And what can UK do to support victims of sexual violence?
Well, some of that support I've already mentioned does cover support to victims of sexual violence. But on top of that, our Minister has recently announced another £2 million of funding for healthcare for victims of sexual violence. And part of our new human rights and peace-building programme will work with women's organisations to provide support to victims of gender-based violence.
The health sector around the world is under strain from the global pandemic. On top of that, hospitals in areas which were under the control of the TPLF in Afar and Amhara regions were looted and destroyed. What can UK do to help revive these crippled health institutions?
Well, we aren't only looking at healthcare facilities and other damages or damaged institutions in Amhara, Afar and Tigray, as the north of Ethiopia. We are trying to make sure that we look at the whole of the country. And as we look to write our new business plan, because our financial year begins on the 1st of April, so that's 6 weeks' time, we are planning and prioritising what we will do in the new year. And that will include looking at how we can help the recovery in the conflict-affected areas in northern Ethiopia, but also in other parts of Ethiopia too, where there have been various challenges, either through disease, which you've mentioned, through droughts, flood, you name it. We want to make sure that we support the whole country and don't just focus on the north.
This is according to Ethiopian Ministry of Education. 3 universities and nearly 1,100 schools were first used as campus and then later on destroyed by the occupying force, the TPLF. And what is the role of UK in rebuilding such schools, if any?
Well, our role is to support the ministries, to support the authorities. It's not to lead things ourselves, but our particular support to education, the program we had was due to finish at the end of 2022, so in 11 months' time. We have just decided to extend that, and so we will continue to work in many of the conflict-affected areas, including with the rebuilding of more than 1,000 schools.
Recently, Amnesty International report exposed grave human rights violations in Amhara region, and United Kingdom is very much serious when it comes to human rights, when it comes to the rights of women. And what is its position when it comes to accountability and justice to the victims?
I think our position is quite clear, that no matter who has committed war crimes or atrocities, they should be held accountable, no matter which armed group or which army they represent. If they have committed war crimes, if they have committed gross violations of international humanitarian law, etc., we hope that they will be held accountable.
Recently, UK Member of Parliament and Minister for Africa, Vicky Ford, praised the government of Ethiopia's decision not to send troops to Tigray. But TPLF renewed its attacks in Amhara and Afar. Do you think peace can be established by only putting pressure on the government of Ethiopia?
Well, let me say that we don't only put pressure on the government of Ethiopia. Ever since the 4th of November 2020, I have been in touch with people on all sides. That includes the government in Addis, but also the people in Tigray. And I have visited Tigray during the conflict as well. And I have made it clear that the UK government's position is to press for peace, to have protection of civilians, and to hold accountable those who have committed war crimes. Similarly, we have worried about the possibility of starvation among people who are food insecure. And so that is also why we called for a humanitarian ceasefire to allow the delivery of food and medicines. So we will continue to press all sides, not just the government and the TPLF, to come to the table. We support the work of former Nigerian President Obasanjo as the African Union's High Representative to try and find a peace for this country, because what we'd love to be able to do is help the people who've been affected by conflict, but also go back to rebuilding this amazing country.
Let's go to regional situations. According to recent reports from World Food Programme, more than 13 million people across the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, face severe hunger as the devastating drought spread across this region. And how fast should the international community, including UK, react to this massive crisis?
Well, I hope that the international community is already reacting. We have already announced funding. You mentioned our Minister for Africa, Vicky Ford. When she was here 4 weeks ago, she announced £5 million to help with drought-affected areas here in Ethiopia. She announced other funding to help with drought-affected communities. And so that was a month ago. And we hope that others will do the same. They will not only announce funding, but also work with the communities and international organizations in ways which will help those affected communities, but also mitigate the effects of the drought.
Climate seems real, and just we are seeing its effect in the Horn of Africa, and UK has this interest to work with the surrounding countries when it comes to climate change. And what are the sort of things that you are trying to do when it comes to challenging the problem in a permanent base?
Well, you may remember that in November, the UK hosted COP26, the global conference on climate change. It was in my hometown of Glasgow in Scotland, and it made a number of commitments to help particularly the countries which have been most affected by drought. And when we're talking about Africa, we're also talking about the countries which have contributed least to climate change but are affected most by its effects. And so we're working very closely with our African partners to put pressure on those who have made commitments in Glasgow to deliver on those commitments. We will deliver on ours. And because the next COP is going to be held in Africa, in Egypt, we're also working very closely with the African Union and with our Egyptian friends to make sure that we can hand over in a very positive and effective way what was started in Glasgow and will be continued through Sharm el-Sheikh.
UK Ambassador to Ethiopia and Permanent Representative of the African Union, thank you for being here.
It's always my pleasure.
I'm Johannes Lijalem. You are watching Messenger from Mahara Media Corporation, and thank you for watching.